As a leader, supervisor, or coach, you're responsible for motivating yourself and others. In this video, I'll share 5 motivation tips for gaining a more positive mindset. As I'm sharing these tips, think about what motivates you. And what I invite you to do is post your comments in the section below to see what does motivate you. And also remember to like and subscribe for more of these kinds of tips. Be sure to watch this right to the end because my last tip is shockingly simple, and yet it has the most impact on self-esteem and building your personal brand. I'm Jeff Mowatt. For over 30 years, managers have invited me to come in to help motivate their teams. So these are based on real-world high performers within organizations. Now, I want to warn you, these are not the typical motivation messages you might expect. You know, that you can do anything, just believe in yourself. That is nonsense. That stuff just wears off in minutes. What I'm going to share are strategies that are sustainable over years. And these are the kind of motivation tips that will impact your career, your finances, your relationships, and your overall health. First, let's see where you're at right now when it comes to motivation. Motivation is linked to energy. In terms of your energy, if you are, physically tired or mentally depressed, you're not going to feel motivated. So which of these statements would describe your energy at work? Are you A, bubbling with enthusiasm? Or are you B, bursting with energy? Are you C, pulsating with positivity? Or D, none of the above? Well, I hope you said D, none of the above, because most people find at work that the other leadership styles are over the top and ironically demotivating. When it comes to motivation, there is let's call it a magic mix. To inspire others, our mindset needs to be positive and optimistic, but also be realistic. Our energy needs to be higher than average, but not frenzied. In other words, the most effective high performers that we find in leadership positions are those that exude what I would call cool, quiet confidence. Now that's easier said than done. And that brings us to motivation tip number 1 for having a more positive mindset is start strong. Unfortunately, a lot of people start their working day working on the wrong tasks for the right reasons. Think about how you might start your day as a manager or leader or business owner. Think of 3 categories of tasks that you might start off with. You might have customer issues. You got some customers who are in a rush, that type of thing. You got to take care of customers yourself. You may interact with some of the bigger customers that you have as a manager. You also have administrative tasks. Maybe you need to schedule employees. You may need to focus on inventory management, supply chain issues. You may have some cash flow things you need to take care of, administrative tasks. And then the third category, we have customers, administrative tasks. The third category then is what I call strategic growth issues. Things that you can work on today that are going to improve your overall profitability over the long term. It's things that are going to improve your efficiency, maybe cut down on your costs. It's ways of hiring the right people to make sure that over the long term, you're going to be viable and profitable. All right, so the question is, which task do we start our day with? Well, I have to confess that one of the biggest mistakes I made early in running my small business was I made customers my number 1 priority. It was the biggest mistake I made in the first 5 years of running my business. Like, who knew? I always thought that if you make customers your most important priority, then, hey, with customers, you're going to do well. But then I came across a realization in year 5 that hit me like a bunch of rocks. And when I say bunch of rocks, you remember that experiment that happened back in science class when you're in elementary school? If you ever saw this, the teacher might take a pitcher and they fill it full of big rocks. And then they ask all the kids, so is it full? And the kids go, yeah, it's full. But then the teacher puts in a bunch of gravel, smaller rocks, shakes it up, and asks the kids, now, is it full? And now we're kind of going, yeah, it's full. Well, then the teacher takes a bunch of sand and works it in there, shakes it up and goes, now is it full? It's right to the brim. And we're going, well, yeah. And then the teacher puts in some water and goes, yes, now it's full. Now, that was all about displacement, but I think the lesson for us is it's pretty hard to put the big rocks in later. If we get so distracted with all the little things that we're doing, the big rocks don't get done. And so the lesson for us about working on the right things and having more impact is, yes, okay, it sounds good to work on customer issues, but actually you're going to have more impact over the long term if you focus on strategic growth issues. And all I'm talking about is for the first hour and a half, the first 90 minutes of your day. If we focus on those issues, realistically, we accomplish more than the other 6 hours we might spend on customer issues and administrative issues over the course of the day combined. So my suggestion is, yes, start with those strategic growth issues that lead to long-term profitability over the long term, but then go to customer issues. And at the very end of your day, you go into, what is it, administrivia? Because I think that is an accurate way of describing it. It's the little cash flows, making sure that you get the reports in, that kind of stuff. One way of looking at this is when you're focusing on strategic growth projects, you are acting like a leader within your department or your organization. When we are working on customer issues, well, now we're being more of a worker, frontline worker. And when we're working on administrative tasks, well, now we're working as a clerk. In fact, one of the first things we can do as we grow an organization is those administrative tasks should probably be either outsourced, automated, or delegated. So that's my tip for you. Focusing on long-term strategic projects makes you realize and feel like you're actually accomplishing something. When we focus on long-term success items, you know that you're doing something to address long-term issues. So when you do have those fires that you have to fight over the course of the day, you have the confidence of knowing, hey, we're addressing that. We're looking at different sources that we're going to use for our supplies. And yes, there's an issue right now, but we're going to fix it long term. And your employees, your coworkers, supervisors, those around you, they will get that sense from you that you're not panicking, that you have things under control, and you actually will have things under control. It also gives you a feeling of self-esteem, like you are accomplishing something. And that in itself is rewarding, it's energizing, and it is motivating. Motivation tip number 2 for having a more positive mindset: blow off some steam. You know how when you're on an airplane somewhere, as you start your flight, the flight attendants have this orientation safety meeting where they talk about, in the event of sudden depressurization, an oxygen mask will be deployed from the overhead. If you're traveling with small children, place the mask over yourself before helping others. And part of that is you're supposed to place it over yourself and go,
"Luke, I am your father."
That is required by law. Anyway, I think the first time we hear that, we think that, well, what kind of a parent would take care of themselves instead of their kids? But, of course, the reality is that we realize that if we expire ourselves, well, we're not going to be in any position to help anyone else. Well, I believe that's true when it comes to our workplace long-term performance as well. We often think that we need to be making a career our priority, and therefore we're going to do really well at work. But the reality is, if our physical health has deteriorated, we're not going to be any good to anyone, including ourselves. So when we talk about this idea of blowing off some steam, I'm referring to the importance of, if you have a job where you experience a lot of stress and you find that you are mentally fatigued and sometimes frustrated, and heavens, who doesn't experience that at their job, especially if you're a manager, supervisor, business owner, then consider starting your day by exercising first thing in the morning before you go to work. And just like they do on an airplane where you take care of yourself first, well, same thing applies to taking care of your physical fitness first thing in the day. And the great feeling that you have is over the course of the day, you know how sometimes, I'll bet you experienced this, where sometimes You get so many little fires that you have to fight. You've got so many things coming at you, so many emails, texts, all this stuff coming at you that, well, a client of mine said at one point, you felt defeated by your day. Well, I think we've all experienced that. So the idea of exercising first is that even when things are going sideways, you have the comfort of knowing that you've taken care of yourself. One of the biggest things that adds to our stress, I believe, at least if you're used to taking care of yourself and your physical fitness, is near the end of the day, you start feeling you're tired, you're worn down. And you add to that the guilt of realizing I've got to get this thing done. So I'm not going to get to the gym. I'm not going to get a chance. And we feel worse about our day and worse about ourselves. Whereas when you start off first thing in the day, there is this idea of self-esteem. And self-esteem is not looking in the mirror again and saying, I like myself. No, it doesn't work. Self-esteem is something we respect, and we respect ourselves when we exercise, because no one can exercise for us. It's something that we earn ourselves, and we feel better about ourselves. We're more confident. We feel more capable. And we, over the course of the day, don't feel like we've been defeated by our day, and we feel more motivated. Just before I get to my next motivation tip, I hope you're finding this to be helpful. And I do have lots more to share. So be sure to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, like, and post comments. I do read all the comments. Motivation tip number 3 for having a more positive mindset: eliminate wish lists. Now, I know that I think we all agree when it comes to achieving your goals in life, it's nice to have a sense of a vision of what direction you're going to go. And I agree fully. I'm all for writing annual goals. I've done it for decades now, and it does work. However, oftentimes people interpret the idea of having a vision for your life as being, okay, the easy way to make this happen, and there's the key words there, easy way. The easy way is I'm going to create a vision board. And the premise is that you put actually literally a board where you cut out what you'd like your life to look like. Maybe it's, a sports car that you have, or a nice house you want to live in, or a beautiful place you want to go, or the resources, the money you want to have, that kind of thing. And you post that on your fridge. And when you see that all the time, by visualizing it, focusing on it, it will manifest itself in your life. Bullshit. Now, I hate to be crass, and I rarely am when I'm doing seminars, but it is such nonsense. There are so many books out there that I guess, the idea is The Secret, there's a great one, where the premise is that you visualize what you want in your life and it will magically manifest itself. Well, I think that is crap. I don't think putting a picture of a Maserati on your fridge is going to do a single thing to make it appear in your driveway. On the contrary, what if focusing on your vision board, had the opposite effect, which I believe is true. I think it's actually counterproductive, because put it this way: imagine that you have these great visions, all these things you want to have happen, but there are some encumbrances that you don't predict that get in your way. I mean, maybe you have some physical health issues. Maybe you have this thing. Have you heard of it? It's called COVID. It happened in our city in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I don't know if it happened for you, but it certainly slowed down a lot of businesses. And so what happens is here's our vision for life, and yet we're not achieving it. We're still see that it's not a Maserati. We're driving an aging Corolla, whatever. So that vision board, every time we look at it, it's actually an accusation. It's kind of saying, why don't you look better, feel better, have more? So I don't think that's motivating. I think that's actually depressing. Think of it another way as well. Consider when people come over, your friends, family, colleagues, and you have this on your fridge, and it's pictures of this really nice sports car you don't have, the house you don't have. Well, frankly, I think it makes you look kind of superficial and somewhat desperate or needy, which I don't think enhances your brand or your reputation with those people. And these are the people who are more likely to actually help you achieve your goals. So I believe that those are counterproductive, those vision boards, despite all the quote unquote experts who seem to claim that this is a great way of manifesting success in your life. What a bunch of nonsense. What if the opposite were true? And in fact, it is. I was working with a client, Ziva Mortgages, who invited me to come down and speak at their high performers conference down in Las Vegas. which I think was kind of funny because the name of the company is Ziva Mortgages. So there I was as a closing keynote speaker, and I was thinking, Ziva, Las Vegas. Thank you. Thank you very much. I thought it was funny anyway. They giggled a little bit. So Ziva Mortgages brings down their top performers, and they're talking about what they've done over the course of the year. Now, the number one performer in the company that year happened to be Dave LaCusta. And he talked about what he did differently to put him at the very top earning level of that company when it comes to being a mortgage broker. And his tip, he said the one thing that he did differently, he started his morning by writing in a journal and talking about things that he was grateful for. In other words, he was keeping a gratitude log. And he said that one thing changed his mindset and gave him better results. And he ended up with better results. Now, coincidentally, later that night, this is still in Las Vegas, one of the other speakers was Colin Dreyer. And Colin Dreyer was the founder of Verico Mortgages, which is the parent company that spun off Ziva Mortgages. And so Colin he's the big kahuna. He's the guy who was in the Insurance Hall of Fame. And he and I and a few other of the owners there were having dinner. And Colin and I were chatting about high performance and what had done well for him in life. And he said he learned early in his career to have an attitude of gratitude. Well, that was good enough for me. And so from that day forward at Ziva Mortgages, there was a little pad and paper, and I started writing in what things I was grateful for in the mornings. Well, I went through a couple of those pads, and eventually I just started, because my handwriting is so lousy, I started typing in every morning things I'm grateful for, including this morning before I started doing this video. And so what we find is that rather than focusing on things that, oh gosh, I wish I had more of this, I wish I had more of this, instead you start your day with, man, I'm so glad that this happened, or that I did this, or that I achieved that. And it puts you in a state of feeling fortunate and feeling grateful. Now, think about how your friends might interpret you. If you focus on a vision board about, oh, I wish I had this, I wish I had this, you look needy. If, on the other hand, you're surrounded by things that you're grateful for, pictures of people you like, trips that you've taken, people look like, wow, you seem like you're accomplishing something, and they seem more drawn to you, and they're more likely to be supportive of you. So that's my suggestion for you. Eliminate wish lists. Yes, it's good to have an idea of what direction you want to go, and certainly set goals for yourself. But rather than having a wish list of stuff you want, think about things that you're grateful for in your life. That's more positive mindset. It's going to get you through the day with much more energy and motivation. So what do you think? Do vision boards do more harm than good? What if we replace vision boards by setting yearly goals and daily gratitude logs? What's your opinion? Please post them down below in your comments. I'd love to read them. Motivation tip number 4 for having a more positive mindset: be less professional. Yeah, I said that. Be less professional. Often people think that as you grow in your responsibilities throughout an organization, you need to be serious. I mean, work is serious. You need to be seen as serious and head down, focused. Well, what if the opposite were true? What if being seen as too serious actually diminished the amount of motivation that people had around you and less motivation that you had? Consider the example of my neighbor who, until he passed away a few years ago, used to live right across the street from us. I'm talking about Peter Levesque, actually Judge Peter Levesque. He was a judge in family court law for many years, highly respected. And I got to know him as a neighbor and a friend, actually, until he passed away just a few years ago. And I remember one of the conversations that we had about Peter's approach to work. We're talking about business techniques and what happens out there and why certain people are more accomplished more than others. And of course, he's dealing with family court, families being broken up, that kind of thing. And he said, his job was, in fact, at times stressful, and certainly stressful for some of the clerks and staff who worked in chambers there. And so once a year at Easter time, he would don a bunny suit and an Easter basket filled with chocolate-covered eggs, And he'd hop around chambers, not of course in the courtroom, but behind chambers with all the staff and the support folks who were there handing out Easter eggs. Peter Levesque, Judge Peter, became Peter Rabbit. And people loved him for it. His employees, they were devoted to him because he brought some joy, some levity, some perspective in life. Yes, there are families that were in jeopardy out there, but there are also a lot of families out there that were doing fine. And he wanted to give people a little bit of a break. So yeah, I know it's common for people to think that we should be serious at work, but the reality is, especially as a leader, if you can lighten up and use self-effacing humor, it shows that you have things in perspective. Not everything is a crisis, that you are in control. And that goes a long way to earning people's loyalty. You're going to feel better yourself. You know, the funny thing is even by laughing, ha ha ha, we lower our heart rate down. So my encouragement to you, and motivation tip number 4 for having a more positive mindset, is in fact, give yourself a break, cut some slack, and use self-effacing humor to help re-energize your day. I hope you're finding this to be helpful. Speaking of which, if you like this video, I think you're going to love my tips. You'll find them for free at jeffsbusinesstips.com. That's jeffsbusinesstips.com. Remember, I said this last motivation tip is one that is shockingly simple? Well, motivation tip number 5 for having more positive mindset, and these are the keys to the universe: earn more trust. So a question I invite you to think about is, how reliable would people say that you are? And I mean, not so much sort of generally reliable, but I'm talking about that when you say you're going to do something, you do it, no matter what. Well, you know, it's interesting because I've had the opportunity to get to know a lot of people who are quite successful, because I've been in the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. These people are hired to come in as thought leaders and share their information with companies and associations. And I've served on the board for many years. I was one of the founding 4 presidents. And so I got to know a lot of these highly, quote unquote, successful speakers, a lot of motivational speakers out there. And I discovered something that I found kind of surprising. Virtually all of them are professional speakers. They are good in front of an audience. They're good training. However, having a chance to really get to know them behind the scenes on projects for the association, there are several who I have happily recommended to my clients for 2 reasons. They're smart, and you know, I'd argue that they're all pretty smart at that level. However, they are reliable, and that is a different thing. They actually step up to take on tasks and they execute. They get them done. They don't come up with excuses. And so those are the kind of people that I have recommended, referred to my clients. Oh gosh, you know, literally thousands of dollars that I've generated for those colleagues because they are reliable. Now, by contrast, there's also a few of those folks, and luckily it's only a few folks, who have been on committees and they like the idea, the status of being a director in an association. However, when it comes to actually getting things done, they talked, but they didn't do. And even though I've seen them in front of audiences or in front of their clients at times, I would never recommend them to one of my clients because these people are not reliable. So my question for you when it comes to reliability is, when you make a commitment, do you execute consistently? And I mean, we don't even use words like I'll try or I'll do my best. We just say no. I mean, we say, you know, if we're going to make a commitment, we do make a commitment. And the bottom line is this, is that when we're making commitments, if we can just keep them, no matter what it costs you, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you don't feel like doing it. Yeah, you said you'd go out for dinner, but now you don't feel like doing it. You said you'd meet them for lunch, but things came up, you got busy. If you said you're going to do it, you do it. If you said you're going to do a chore over the weekend, you get it done over the weekend. Now, the reason for that is because it earns trust and people learn that you can be relied upon, and therefore you're given other opportunities to take on more responsibilities, and you're earning that respect from people, and therefore you do grow. It's relatively easy to see your career as you probably experience this, if you're a manager or leader yourself, it's pretty easy because so many people step back and come up with excuses, where if you just step up and deliver on your promises, it engages the entire team. They're thinking, wow, she's great or he's great. And again, it's one of those self-esteem feelings. Self-esteem, again, is not staring at the wall, doing a mantra, I like myself, I'm respected. No, it doesn't work that way. If we sit around watching TV and give excuses for why we're not being effective in life. What does work to make us feel good about ourselves, literally esteem, respect ourselves, is when we get things done. So my encouragement to you is really be careful about making commitments. And when you do, I'm going to repeat this one more time, keep them. No matter what it costs you, and I mean costs you personally. When you give your word, that's it. And there's no, I really promised. I didn't promise. There was no fine print. It's you say you're going to do something, you just do it. All right. So look at all those motivation tips. Let's briefly recap. And as I recap, I'm going to invite you to think about, okay, which of those 5 motivation tips do you think you're doing really well? And which ones can you work on? And I'm going to ask you to comment on those below in the comments section. So is it that you start strong? In other words, you start your day with long-term success items as opposed to focusing on customer items. Is there room for improvement in that area? How about blowing off some steam? Are you able to exercise? You find time. Now, even if it isn't first thing in the morning, maybe you take time during lunch or before lunch or after work, but you've got something consistent. And one suggestion I'd make for you in that one is, sacrifice an hour of TV at night to get up an hour earlier if you have to. Let's go to our third motivation tip, and that is get rid of wish lists. Instead of having pictures of things you want, instead, what if we certainly set goals for ourselves and plans for how we're going to achieve those, but then start our day writing down 5 things that you're grateful for in life and see how that changes your mindset and sense of motivation. Motivation tip number 4, and that is becoming less professional, less serious. Business isn't all about seriousness. It's also about lightening up and having some perspective in life and realizing that, hey, unless you are in emergency services, which, heaven, good for you if you are, but unless you're literally out there saving lives, then, hey, lighten up a little bit and use some self-effacing humor from time to time, and you will bring more perspective and motivation to your day. And the last motivation tip is all about focusing on building trust. And building trust and earning trust is really about making commitments and keeping them no matter what it costs you. Well, I do hope you found this to be helpful. And again, if you like this video, then I think you are going to love my tips, which you're going to find at jeffsbusinesstips.com. See you next time.